Hello and welcome, everybody. I'm Gustavo Tolosa, the host of this online book club, and today is a happy and a kind of a sad session for me because it's the end. Of course, when it's the ending of every book, it's a little bit sad to see you all go, but I know you'll come back for the next one. The next book club is in January, and we will be reading one of Dr. McDougall's best books, which is Dr. McDougall's Medicine, A Second Opinion. And this is a free book club open to everyone, and I hope that you will join me for that. Later on, I'll put the link. And today, for our last session, this is the 10th session. We took a little bit over 2 months to go over this wonderful book, and we have had Dr. Lisle as a guest, and today we have the other co-author of the book, Dr. Alan Goldhamer, that I am going to welcome right now. So Dr. Goldhamer, if you want to turn on your camera, there we go. We can put you on the screen here. Thank you for being here today. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Very, very much. So talking about chapter 15, let me see if I can share the screen with you. I was reading it earlier today, and I thought it was so interesting, the very first paragraph where it says that this chapter tells a story that some people will find difficult to believe, and that sensible people might even resist it because it's a message that sometimes is counterintuitive. But sometimes we have to listen and reconsider previous opinions that we've had on the subject. And this subject is fasting. And I have never heard you or Dr. Lisle talk about this story that I'd like for you to, maybe if you don't mind at the beginning, just tell us this story of this physician in the year 1877, Henry S. Tanner. This is the first time that I heard of that story, and I thought it was so interesting. So if you would maybe start with that and then take it over and talk to us about how fasting can save lives, and then we'll just ask questions.
Sure. Well, Dr. Tanner's story is an interesting one because this was a physician practicing conventional medicine who was suffering himself from rheumatism and other health problems and didn't believe in suicide, but his life had gotten to the point where he didn't want to live it anymore. It was just intolerable. And so he knew from his training that humans could go 7 to 10 days without eating and then they would die. And so he decided what he would do would be to end his life by withholding food. And he proceeded to do that. And, a day passed, a few days passed, a week passed. By the time he got to day 11 of his fast, he was starting to notice that he was feeling dramatically better, that many of his pains and problems had started to ease. He consulted with one of his colleagues and went on to fast for 42 days. Long story short, he recovered his health. And it gave him an introduction to this idea of fasting as a tool of undoing the consequences of dietary excess. And in fact, that is what fasting can actually do. It's the complete abstinence of all substances except pure water in an environment of complete rest is how we define fasting. And as it is today, most of the suffering that's going on in our industrialized societies are diseases associated with dietary excess. So obesity, diabetes type 2, autoimmune diseases, cancers such as lymphoma, cardiovascular disease. These conditions all tie back to making poor dietary choices that result in excess feeding. And if you've read The Pleasure Trap, you understand that the motivational triad for humans is seeking pleasure, avoiding pain, and conserving energy. And the dietary pleasure trap does just that. People seek the foods with the highest caloric density they can get because that stimulates more dopamine production in the brain. And when you realize humans evolved in an environment of scarcity, it makes sense. The brain is trying to keep the body alive. And keeping alive in a natural setting means get enough to eat and don't get eaten. And live long enough so that you can reproduce. And so, feeding behavior and sexual behavior, the normal natural stimulants of dopamine production. In the modern world, though, we've learned to fool those normal mechanisms. We've done it with things like drugs, which artificially stimulate dopamine production in the brain. So you end up with problems with alcoholism and drug addiction, banging on those dopamine production cascades, but artificially leading to an addictive response. And the same thing's true in terms of diet. We've learned that there's chemicals that we can add to the feed that stimulates dopamine production in the brain. For example, if you take rats or mice and give them their normal rat chow and they eat as much as they want, they get to a certain size. But if you put certain chemicals in the feed, they'll increase their body weight 49% in just 60 days. And the chemicals that you can add to the feed of these rats and mice are the same chemicals we put in our feed, SOS, salt, oil, and sugar. Salt, oil, and sugar are not actually food. They're chemicals, hyper-concentrated components of food. They're put into the food that stimulate dopamine production. And as a consequence, we overeat. And we develop obesity, and then we get metabolic syndrome, and then we have increased risk of dying from heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and even conditions like acute infections like COVID-19. Those are the risk factors that make you more vulnerable to dying from everything, including infectious disease. So this pleasure trap is a really insidious problem. What we've found is that we can take this very ancient practice of fasting and use it to give the body a chance to undo the consequences of dietary excess and escape the dietary pleasure trap. So when we have patients fast for anywhere from 5 to 40 days, during that time, the body's able to unwind very efficiently these consequences of excess. And fasting itself is what's called a biological adaptation. That means everybody that's human, all modern humans, have the ability to change their brain fuel from burning ketones, or a byproduct of fat, specifically beta-hydroxybutyric acid, from the normal fuel, which is glucose. So normally the brain pollutes glucose, and it turns out the brain of a human, which is huge, it's ridiculously large, 2.5 times, for example, that of the chimpanzee. And it burns so much glucose that if it weren't for our ability to fast, our species wouldn't have been able to wander away from the tropics and survive. The first time spring came, all the humans would have died, because you could only go about a week or so, just like a chimp. And that's why you'll never see chimps wandering away from the tropics. They live where there's a constant supply, readily available supply of fuel all year long. Spring comes late for very long with chimps, and they would die because they can't convert their brain fuel from glucose to fat, whereas humans can. So that's why we say biological adaptation. And all the humans that couldn't do that died. And we're the byproducts of those people that survived, and the survivors were all the ones that were able to fast. So we take this very natural process, this biological adaptation of fasting, we apply it in a very unnatural setting, which is the modern world, where dietary excess is the rule rather than the exception. And it turns out it works really well. So we fast patients from 5 to 40 days. We've published a number of papers in peer-reviewed journals showing that it can be done safely and it can be done effectively.
All right. So at TrueNorth Health Center, you have is 40 days the longest you've had a patient?
Well, no, it's the longest we routinely fast patients. We have had patients we've had to go a little bit longer. That's by force, not by choice. We prefer not to go over 40 days. By keeping the fast relatively shorter, you don't get the complications that can occur from very, very long-term fasting. When you're fasting, you're burning labile reserves. Eventually, you deplete your labile reserves, and then you enter a process called starvation. And if you keep in the starvation phase, then you die. And we don't do that because it would be really bad for our outcome data.
Right. I was reading also in the chapter that animals instinctively fast. Is that something, and did I read it correctly, that it is usually because they're ill, they're sick, and they're trying to recover, or are there other reasons?
The loss of appetite that characterizes acute disease is one of the hallmarks of indications for fasting, and it's present in animals as well as in human beings.
Yeah, yeah. And another thing I was reading that is counterintuitive, like it says at the beginning, is when a person is sick. I've seen someone sick in a hospital and they're trying to shove food when the person doesn't want to eat. So that is a normal mechanism, would you say, of human beings as well when they're going through an illness?
Acute disease is characterized by amongst other things, with usually a loss of appetite. And part of it's because the body's not well equipped to process foods. It's going to divert its energy to try to healing. In the acute illness phase, eating may not be, the best idea.
Right.
Certainly you have to maintain hydration. So maintaining hydration, always a critical, important issue, but not necessarily consuming concentrated amounts of calories.
Right. And when someone does water fasting, I've tried it there at TrueNorth Center. It's not any kind of water, correct? Well,
it should be purified water. You just want water. I mean, the most purified form of water would be like what rainwater would be if there wasn't a polluted environment. That's distilled water.
Yeah.
So it's just H2O, and that's what we use. We use fractionally distilled water, but you could use any type of highly purified water and probably be fine. It's just that when people are fasting, they're not going to really tolerate hydrochloric halocarbons and chlorine and all the contaminants in the public water because they get very sensitive. They don't like it. So you just get pure water without anything else. That's usually the best fuel for, or I should say, solute for fasting.
Right. I'm interested in Dr. Goldhamer in all the work that you all do there in research and studies, and so if you could tell us a little bit about the studies and the research that you do and where it is published, if it's published.
Yeah, so we do have a number of papers published in peer-reviewed journals, including recently the British Medical Journal. We were able to publish a report on the treatment of follicular lymphoma. We recently did a 3-year follow-up on that particular subject, and now we have 6-year follow-up data that we'll be resubmitting next month, along with some additional cases of lymphoma that have also done exceptionally well. In fact, these were stage 4 follicular lymphoma. We have not only good outcomes post-fasting, but follow-up data with positive confirmation with CT scans, et cetera. So we would like to eventually do a clinical trial in the treatment of lymphoma. We expect that we would do quite well compared to conventional management. We've also published 2 papers on the treatment of high blood pressure, medically supervised water-only fasting in the treatment of hypertension, as well as in the treatment of borderline hypertension. And those papers, in that study, we had 174 consecutive patients with high blood pressure, and 174 people lowered their pressure enough to eliminate the need for medication. And those papers, and all of our papers, are available free on our website, fasting.org. That's the Foundation's website where all of our research and research of other people doing work on fasting is published. So I'd encourage people to go on to there. They can also go to our website at TrueNorthHealth.com and get our, not only also the articles are linked, but also our lectures and other materials. So lots of sources for free access to these materials. We've also published a safety study, because people say, well, is it safe though? It might work, but can it be done safely? And we did a fasting safety study, and it has been published, and it's available on the website. It shows the results of treating 5 years of consecutive patients with the use of fasting, and adverse events that occur and what can be expected, and the conclusions are readily available. We've also published a number of case reports on conditions ranging from the treatment of subacute appendicitis to supposedly demented patients that are able to wake up that actually were suffering from polypharmacy. We have patients on treatment of various types of growths and tumors. We've got a lot of content. In fact, a whole bunch of it will be coming out this year, because we've completed a couple major studies, one with our colleagues at the Mayo Clinic, one with our colleagues at Texas A&M. So you'll be able to see more and more material coming out. And the theme that keeps repeating is, when you have a condition that's associated with dietary excess and you fast, the body's able to do what it does best, and that's heal itself.
Yeah, correct. And I love that those two words, dietary excess, because um, people sometimes don't realize that our ancestors, could not walk to the supermarket or go across the street to the mini market or whatever and get anything they wanted any time of the day, as much as they wanted. So, how do you define? I know it's a silly question, maybe, but how do you define dietary excess? I mean, why? Oh, what's going on?
Well, in order to induce dietary excess, you need to induce the dietary pleasure trap. So you need to use highly processed foods or include sugar, oil, and salt. If you just eat your fill of whole natural foods, fruits, vegetables, minimally processed grains, beans, nuts, and seeds, the normal satiation mechanisms kick in. We talk about that in the pleasure trap, the satiety mechanisms. But if you fool the brain by using a drug-like effect by including these chemicals in the food, you will overeat. It's just a question of how much. And a lot of that just depends on your own individual satiation sensitivity. Dietary excess is the inevitable result of fooling the natural mechanism. It works in animals too. Like, you don't see any fat animals in nature unless they get exposed to our highly processed food. Then birds will gain 49% of their weight in 60 days. They'll get so fat they can't fly. That never happens with them eating natural bird feed. It only happens if they get access to our highly processed refined carbohydrates, etc. So the dietary pleasure trap is the reason why people are overweight. It's why they're sick. It's why we have the problems that we have in our society today. And it's not very well recognized because people have been miseducated into thinking that a diet of greasy, fatty, slimy, dead, decaying flesh and highly processed foods is normal and natural. And of course, that's a mistake.
Right, because dietary excess doesn't happen like sometimes AJ says when other people that I interview. There is no dietary excess eating kale or eating lettuce. The dietary excess is with these highly processed food. And,
it's the sugar, the oil, and the salt, and unfortunately, today the average person eats as much as 150 pounds a year of sugar.
Right.
Think about that. That's the average. I'm not eating any, which means somebody's getting, a whole lot. They're eating my share as well.
Yeah.
And so people are working really hard to see how fat and sick they can get, and they're doing a great job of it.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you, if a person would like to try fasting at home.
Yes.
What would be a safe number of days? Well, first of all, can anyone fast, do water fast? Or are there...
Not everybody can fast. There's a number of people that shouldn't be fasting. There's a number of relative contraindications to fasting. For example, people that are pregnant or lactating will have anorexia nervosa, if they have type 1 diabetes, if they've had a recent stroke, MI, pulmonary embolism, or if they have atrial fibrillation, if they're on anticoagulant therapies, if they've got severe kidney disease, if they have porphyria or medium chain acetylcoenzyme A dehydrogenase deficiency, if they've got depletion cachexia, or they've got the inability to discontinue their medications, these are not people that would be doing water-only fasting. Everybody can do intermittent fasting that limit their feeding window to, say, 12 to 16 hours. We recommend that for everybody because it doesn't require medication modification. It's not a contraindication in any of the conditions I've mentioned. So that means everybody stops eating, let's say, 3 to 4 hours before you go to bed at night. And maybe you delay breakfast a little bit when you have your break fast, that first morning in the meal, till you've had a chance to do some exercise or something. So that the total amount of time fasting for everybody every day is somewhere between 12 and 16 hours. So that means you eat within an 8-hour feeding window. And during that 8 hours, you limit yourself to whole plant foods. What'll happen is if you're a male, you're going to lose about 3 pounds a week down to optimum weight. If you're a female, you're going to lose about 2 pounds a week down to optimum weight. Males will lose about 50% weight faster than females because they have a lot higher testosterone, which is a fat-burning hormone, whereas females have much higher estrogen levels, which is a fat storage hormone, which is why we say that women, biologically speaking, are energy-conserving fat storage devices because they have to store fat more easily to survive a period of biological vulnerability called pregnancy. Because it's only the females in the human species that have babies. Males don't have babies ever. And it's a good thing. I did some math, and we calculated that if males had the babies instead of females, our species would have become extinct after just 20 generations. And the reason we know that's true is because it takes 2.1 births per couple in order to sustain a species. And if males had the babies, we've determined that there would never, ever, ever have been a second birth. It never would have happened. As a consequence, in 20 generations, the population of humans would have become extinct. So thank goodness it is the females that have the children. So the indications for fasting are people have conditions of dietary excess. So they have obesity, they have type 2 diabetes, they have high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, they have autoimmune diseases. Autoimmune diseases are diseases where your immune system attacks itself. And that's often contributed to by dietary leakage, which results in proteins being absorbed that shouldn't be absorbed, that's triggered the immune system to attack your own tissues. That's what, think about rheumatoid arthritis. The deformity associated with RA is your immune system attacking your body. And so in order to get rid of the symptoms of rheumatoid arthritis, you have to first stop the gut leakage, which means get rid of the oxidative components that are damaging the enamel lining of the vessels. And that would include things like animal products, alcohol, cigarette smoking, eating highly processed refined carbohydrates. Once you get rid of the causes, you give fasting as a chance to allow the gut to heal up. You stop the gut leakage or reduce the gut leakage, and now the symptoms under control, the condition's under control. And you don't have to take immune suppressive drugs in order to contain and control the pain and debility. And you can stop the progression and the debility that comes from the drugs themselves, which often is worse than the condition that you're using it to treat it with. So it is entirely possible to manage many of these conditions if you get rid of the cause, the actual reason why people are developing to begin with. But that's not what we do in modern medicine today. What we do today is we spend trillions of dollars treating the leading causes of death, which is heart disease, cancer, and stroke. But we spend very little effort on treating the actual causes of disease. In other words, the reasons people get heart disease, cancer, and stroke. The reason people get heart disease, cancer, and stroke is drinking, smoking, and eating animal foods and highly refined carbohydrates. So if we shifted our attention to treating the actual causes of disease, instead of waiting till the disease develops and then treating the leading causes of death, we'd probably get a lot better bang for our buck.
Yeah, definitely. Well, so let's say that I want to start a fast tomorrow in my house. So how long can I do it at home without having medical supervision and be
So we
safe?
do recommend that it would still be everybody fast every day at home. We encourage that every day for 16 hours.
Right.
And feed during 8 hours. Beyond that, you definitely need medical history exam and laboratory testing.
Okay.
You need to get some advice about, one, are you a good candidate? Number two, if you are a good candidate, what's the best way to do it? You have to do it in an environment of complete rest, because otherwise you get into problems with depletion, dehydration. Right. You know, water fasting, like we're describing in these studies, is done in a medically supervised setting. There's been a medical history and exam and lab to establish baseline. Patients are examined twice a day. They're in a controlled setting. If you're too active in fasting, people want to fast, they go to work or drive. What you do then is you force gluconeogenesis, which is the breakdown of protein, because that's the only place you can get the glucose that extra activity requires. Because you've depleted your glycogen stores within a couple of days of fasting. So the only place left to feed that excess need for sugar would be muscle breakdown. We don't want to do that. We want fat breakdown. If you rest when you're fasting, most of your calories come from breakdown of fat, and not just any fat. It preferentially mobilizes visceral fat, the type of fat around your belly, that on the organs, the kind that is associated with inflammation and disease. Water-only fasting, we did a study recently looking at the body composition changes in fasting. And what we found was that people lose fat, protein, water, fiber, and glycogen during fasting. After fasting, they regain protein, water, glycogen, and fiber, but not fat. The fat loss continues. And while a person might lose 20% of their total fat during a couple weeks of fasting, they may lose as much as 50% or more of their visceral fat. So the health compromising part of the fat is preferentially mobilized during fasting. But this process of fasting needs to be done with history exam and lab behind us, and controlled setting, and support and rest in order for it to be safe and effective.
All right. How many doctors or nurses are working at TrueNorth?
We have 15 doctors and allied health professionals. We have a staff of 70, including our research staff. And every patient has a medical doctor that they're seeing for evaluation history exam initially. They're seeing our staff doctors twice a day when they're at TrueNorth Health. Their vitals are taken. We're monitoring their blood, their urine. And that's how we've been able to do 39 years and 21,000 patients through this water-only fasting process, including very sick people, without any mortality associated with fasting. Fasting is, in fact, can be safe and can be effective if it's done properly.
Right, right. Well, it's a fascinating subject, and I know that you all have gotten a lot more attention and a lot well known. So it takes a lot of quite a lot of time to get in TrueNorth now.
Well, the good news is, though, we have other doctors that we've trained that have opened up other facilities. So even if you can't get into TrueNorth Health right away, you may be able to get into one of our sister organizations that's doing fasting supervision. And for people that are interested in determining whether fasting is appropriate for them, they can take advantage of one of our free services, which is they can go onto our website at TrueNorthHealth.com, complete the registration forms, and offer a no-cost phone conversation with them where I can talk about whether or not fasting might be appropriate for them and try to refer them to the person closest to them that might be able to provide that professional support for them.
Right, right. Yes, that website is wonderful, and I encourage everybody to go and learn or schedule an appointment. Dr. Goldhamer, someone is asking if you would address vasculitis, kidney disease, and healing through fasting.
Well, vasculitis, like all these autoimmune inflammatory type conditions, tends to respond well to fasting. And of course, the problem is, like with all these conditions, no matter how well you do with fasting, you still have to adopt a health promoting diet and lifestyle afterwards in order to sustain the results. And in vasculitis, it's particularly important to get rid of the animal foods, which are high in arachidonic acid, that tend to be like throwing gasoline on the inflammation. Many of these patients are also gluten sensitive, so we get rid of the wheat, and also the sugars, including all the phony sugars and the bee vomits and the molasses and the maple syrups and all these concentrated sweeteners, which people have become so dependent on. We want to get all of those out of the diet. We want the diet to be whole plant foods, fruits, vegetables, grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds. And if we're successful at reducing inflammation with the fast, then often you can sustain that by complying with the diet. And vasculitis, difficult condition that it is, certainly we've seen it respond well to this type of an approach for many people.
All right. And another question, Dr. Goldhamer, do you ever have people on an extended juice fast?
Yeah, sometimes people are not candidates for water-only fasting because they have medications they can't, we may not have been able to wean them off all their medication. And you can't fast on most medications. And so we might do 750 calories of vegetable-based juices and or broth. And so there are some modified approaches that we will do. They're not as effective as water-only fasting, but sometimes they're the best that you can do.
All right. Do you have people are asking here if there are any other places other than California where you have, sister programs like?
Yes, we do in Ohio, Southern California, Texas, Florida. What people can do is if they fill out the registration forms and they do a conversation with me, I can help them. Depending on what their condition is and whatnot, I can help them look at what their options might best be served by.
All right, that's a great idea. Thank you. So maybe we will end with this, Dr. Goldhamer. People like to know usually what is a day like in people like you or Dr. Lisle or Dr. McDougall, whoever. How is a day like in TrueNorth in your life?
Well, a day like in TrueNorth is very different than what my personal day might be like because I'm not living at TrueNorth. But so the day at TrueNorth is patients would wake up, they would see one of the doctors on rounds, they would take their vitals, make sure they're still alive, answer any of their questions. If they're fasting, they go through the fasting process. We have classes at 10 to and 6:30. We encourage them to watch the videos, attend the classes. Rounds are done in the morning and again in the afternoon, so they'll see the staff doctors again. Everything's assessed. And when they come off the fast, we have a fabulous chef and wonderful food. We get them exercising, doing the yoga class, the meditation, whatever it is that it's appropriate for them. And that day cycles until they go home. If they need treatment, we have practitioners available to provide necessary treatment if that's appropriate. A day in my life personally is a little different because I get up at most mornings at 4:56. I go to the gym. I play basketball till about 7:15. Come in, usually take care of some of the business emails and such. I see patients from 9 to noon, and then do phone screening, in the afternoon into the evening, and also, deal with whatever business-related issues take place. So, fortunately for us, we work at TrueNorth Health, so it makes it really easy to eat healthy and live healthy because that's the only thing that's available here. So you can have whatever you want at TrueNorth.
Yeah, that is definitely a big benefit of working at TrueNorth.
Oh, it's wonderful.
I'll just quit all my jobs and I'll apply for jobs.
Yes, absolutely. No shopping, no chopping, healthy food, great people. One of the best things at TrueNorth Health is the kind of people that come here to get well are highly educated, motivated, self-directed individuals.
Yes.
It's a pleasure to be around. So it's always great coming to work because, every day there's going to be 70 people from around the world here going through various processes and getting well. And it's all very exciting.
It is. I must say.
If you have viewers that are physicians and want to do something worthwhile with their life, we have an active residency and internship training program offer at no cost to the doctors, room, board, and training, and they can go through an experience here where they can learn to actually get sick people well. For many doctors, they never get to see these patients recover because, for example, if they're treating high blood pressure, those patients are told they'll be sick for the rest of their life. They'll never get well, and they'll be on drugs forever. Whereas we see these people routinely getting well. So for many of our residents, they say, wow, it's the first time they've ever seen anybody get well with this condition. So for a lot of doctors, it's really an epiphany experience. So we would encourage those, particularly those that are interested in human subjects research, to contact us because we have a really strong program and it's a good opportunity for them. Yes.
Oh, that is wonderful. Wow. A couple of short questions, Dr. Goldhamer. Someone is asking if you could talk about enlarged prostate, not cancer.
Yes, benign prostatic hypertrophy.
Okay.
So benign prostatic hypertrophy is a common condition. The symptoms that make people aware of it is that they're waking up frequently at night. The reason it's so serious is that sleep disruption, where you're waking up 5 or 6 or 7 times a night in order to be able to urinate, disrupts the quality of your sleep, which disrupts healing and not good. Fortunately, with fasting and dietary change, many of these patients are able to dramatically improve that urinary frequency and some of the distress that's associated with it. So definitely worth addressing the diet issues and using fasting if it's appropriate.
Right. Okay. And I think the last one here, someone is asking, is a mostly raw diet based on fruits and leafy greens superior to a diet based on starches, or inferior, or why?
What we recommend is that people eat as much raw fruits and vegetables as they can, and then enough concentrated carbohydrate foods like potatoes, rice, and beans so they don't get too skinny. So the idea is if you're trying to lose weight, you want to eat more of the low-density foods, more salads, steamed vegetables, fresh fruit. If you're trying to gain weight, though, then you might have a little bit less of the salad, a little bit more of the steamed vegetables, potatoes, rice, and beans. If you're just trying to maintain weight, again, you eat huge volumes of salad and steamed vegetables and just enough complex carbohydrates so you don't disappear.
Yeah, we don't want to disappear.
No.
So you at this moment, TrueNorth is or is not offering any kind of program online, like nobody, you can't do a water fasting online.
We do have a program for people that are trying, like we have many patients that right now, particularly our foreign patients that can't get into the United States because of some of the visa restrictions. And we do offer a program. We have Dr. Justin Wise, who does a lot of remote and Zoom work with people that are looking to do remote fasting. But They still need history exam and lab with their local doctor. They still need the collaboration of a local physician in order to be able to get the job done. And frankly, it's a lot easier and much cheaper for most people to go to one of the facilities to fast than to try to find a doctor that's willing to make themselves available 24/7, willing to provide daily exams and provide support. So but we do have, like I have patients, for example, in the Middle East who have their own private full-time physicians, okay? So we've been doing some fasting, they've done fine, they're able to get proper support and monitoring. And you can do that here if you have a physician that's supportive of fasting and is willing to provide you some support. And we've had a couple of hundred doctors who graduated through our residency training program. Some of them have patients that they're able to provide fasting support, and we'll provide remote support to them and or to the patient in terms of providing coaching and guidance and whatnot. But you do need to have a local physician because you still need history exam, lab, and monitoring.
Right.
All right. To be able to get rest, for a lot of people, trying to fast at home is a nightmare because they've got kids and all that kind of stuff. So you do have to make provisions that you can rest, and that after fasting, appropriate feeding is going to be done. That's really the most critical part of fasting, is the fasting termination.
It's coming back.
So, it's actually, most people that have fasted in a controlled setting will choose not to try to fast at home. They would prefer to fast in a place designed to support that. And we would definitely encourage that.
Yeah.
But if you can't, if there's a reason why they can't do that, yes, we have doctors that will try to provide support as long as you can get the necessary support on the other end.
Right. And like you said, it's very important that the person is able to rest. And sometimes at home, it's not possible. You get up, you do this, you do that. Someone calls, you may want to run somewhere because you feel good. And I noticed that at TrueNorth is a very calm lifestyle.
Well, we try to keep it that way.
Right. Well, thank you very much. This has been a wonderful, it always is to have a chat with you, Dr. Goldhamer, and I really appreciate it. Everybody here is super excited, and we look forward, I do, to seeing these studies published. Will they be announced on the website or a newsletter? How do we know when and where they're published?
All they have to do is go to our fasting.org website. Everything will be posted. Also, we're going to have a book coming out next year called Can Fasting Save Your Life? Perhaps we can come back when that book is out and talk to your folks again.
All right. Well, very good. We'll definitely do that. Thank you again. And we will see you all, my friends here in the book club, next month in January for our next book. And thank you, Dr. Goldhamer.
It's my pleasure.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you in the near future. Bye-bye.